She whispered my name, and I knew the line between us was already gone. He noticed her before she ever looked his way. The cafe wasn't crowded, but somehow the air shifted when she walked in, like everything around her adjusted its rhythm. Her voice carried low when she ordered, calm and certain, the kind that made people turn without knowing why.
This
He didn't.
changes everything.
He just watched the light catch on the thin gold chain resting at her collarbone, the quiet steadiness in the way she stirred her coffee. She sat by the window, a seat half-lit, half-shadowed, and he felt the distance between them tighten. He'd seen her before. Once, maybe twice, around campus, speaking with one of the professors. She didn't belong to his world exactly, but somehow she fit into it too easily. He told himself to look away. He didn't. Her age wasn't what made her different. It was the calm, the kind that comes from surviving things and refusing to explain them. There was nothing loud about her beauty. It was in the way she exhaled before speaking, how her smile appeared only after she'd thought about it. He caught himself wondering what she was thinking. And that was the mistake. When their eyes met, it wasn't long, maybe a second too much, but it was enough for her to notice. A pause, a small shift of her lips as if she'd caught him reading her. Then she looked down, pretending to check her phone, though her fingers didn't move for a moment. He almost laughed at himself. Almost. Minutes passed. He went back to his book, but didn't read a line. Every sound, the scrape of a spoon, the low murmur of conversation, pressed against the silence building between them. He didn't know if she felt it too, or if he was just imagining the heat of something that shouldn't be there. When she finally stood to leave, her bag brushed the side of his chair. The scent of her perfume, faint jasmine and rain, lingered long after she'd apologized. "Sorry," she said softly. "It's fine." Her smile was quick, almost nervous. "You read here often?" He blinked, surprised she'd spoken first. "Sometimes, when I'm supposed to be doing other things." A small laugh escaped her. The best kind of procrastination. Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away. He noticed a strand of hair falling over her face. She didn't move to fix it. He wanted to. Ridiculous, impossible thought. But his hands stayed still, fingers tightening around the edge of his cup. "Maybe I'll see you again," she said, voice easy but eyes not quite matching it. "Maybe," he answered, though it sounded more like hope than chance. She nodded once, slow, deliberate, then turned toward the door. He watched the movement of her coat, the way she paused as if to remember something, then stepped out into the drizzle. The bell above the door chimed after her, small, final, unsatisfied. He sat there long after she'd gone, the empty chair across from him a quiet echo of the moment that had already passed. He told himself it didn't matter, that she was just a stranger, a face he'd forget by tomorrow. But when his phone buzzed on the table, he glanced down and froze. Unknown number. "You left your book behind." He looked at the seat she'd occupied. His copy of The Stranger was gone. And beneath her message, 3 dots blinked. Waiting, teasing, pulling him into something he didn't yet understand. He hadn't meant to text her back. He'd stared at her message for nearly an hour, thumb hovering over the keyboard, trying to convince himself that it didn't mean anything, that returning a forgotten book wasn't an invitation. But he did. "Thank you. I didn't even notice." Her reply came minutes later. "You should pay more attention to what you leave behind." There was something teasing in it, light on the surface, but it lingered long after he set his phone down. She lived 2 doors down from his closest friend, Daniel, the connection he hadn't wanted to see at first. When she opened her door that afternoon, holding his worn paperback in one hand and a cup of tea in the other, the realization landed like a quiet blow. "Ethan," she said, remembering his name before he offered it. Her voice was softer in her own home, less composed. "You really should be more careful with Kimu." He smiled, unsure what to do with his hands. "I guess I was distracted." Her eyes met his for a beat too long. "By what?" He didn't answer. She didn't press. The room behind her smelled faintly of old books and something floral, like the inside of a memory. A record played low in the background, something from before he was born. It made her seem timeless and out of reach. She gestured toward the couch. "You can sit if you want. Daniel's not home. I assume you were here for him." That lie came easier than it should have. "Yeah, thought I'd stop by." She nodded, but the corner of her mouth curved slightly, as if she knew better. He noticed her hands first, delicate, unhurried, but with the faintest tremor when she poured him tea. She wasn't nervous. She was controlled, containing something she didn't want to name. He wondered if she felt the same pull, the one that made him notice the hollow of her throat when she leaned forward, the way her laugh sounded like a secret trying not to escape. "Daniel said you're studying literature," she said. "Trying to," he replied. "Mostly I just pretend I know what I'm doing." Her smile softened. "That doesn't go away. You just get better at pretending." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw something he hadn't expected. Tiredness around her eyes, the kind that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of being careful. He wanted to ask about it, but he didn't. She shifted slightly, brushing a loose thread from her sleeve, and the motion broke whatever silence had started to build. "You were married?" he asked before he could stop himself. She hesitated, not offended, just caught off guard. "Once. A long time ago." "Sorry," he murmured. "Don't be." Some things end quietly, like turning off a light. He nodded, feeling the weight of her calm. "I haven't had anything serious," he admitted. "No one worth writing about." That made her look up. "You'll find someone," she said, but the tone was strange, as if she didn't quite believe it herself. The record crackled faintly. Outside, the light shifted against the curtains. When she reached for his empty cup, their fingers touched. Not long, just enough. Her breath caught first, he followed. Neither moved. And in that stillness, everything unspoken between them, the age, the risk, the wrongness, flickered like static. Then she pulled her hand back slowly, eyes lowered, as if the smallest motion might break something fragile. "Tell Daniel I said hello," she whispered. He nodded, but neither of them stood. The record kept turning, soft and endless. It had been weeks since that afternoon. They didn't speak much after. A few polite nods when their paths crossed, a half-smile in Daniel's driveway. Nothing anyone else would notice. But every time Ethan saw her, the quiet between them deepened, like a current neither could escape. He told himself to stop looking. He didn't. One evening, Daniel invited him over. A casual dinner, a few friends. He hadn't known she'd be there until she opened the door, her hair pulled back loosely, the faintest trace of perfume he remembered from before. "Ethan," she said, surprised but composed. "Didn't expect you tonight." "I didn't either," he admitted, voice low. Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen. "Daniel's inside. Come on." The house felt smaller than before, the air warmer. Laughter and conversation filled the background, but every sound blurred when she passed by him, her sleeve brushing against his. The touch was nothing, innocent, but he felt it too sharply to ignore. Later, while the others talked over music, she stepped outside for air. He followed minutes later, telling himself he just needed a break. The night was still, the garden washed in silver from the porch light. She stood near the railing, arms folded, her gaze fixed on something far beyond the fence. "You shouldn't be out here," she said without turning. "You shouldn't either," he replied. That earned a faint smile. "You're too young to sound that sure of yourself." He leaned against the post beside her. "Maybe, but you didn't answer." Her breath left slowly. "It's complicated." "I know." "No, you don't." Her voice was soft, but the words carried a weight he hadn't heard before. When she looked at him, something unguarded flickered in her eyes. Not longing exactly, but the fear of it. He took half a step closer, not meaning to. The scent of jasmine again, or maybe memory, reached him before she did. "This isn't," she started, but stopped, her voice catching. He nodded once, the smallest motion. "I know." Their words hovered uselessly between them. The distance shrank, as if drawn by something neither could control. Her hand rested lightly on the railing. His fingers brushed against it, accidental, then stayed. A sharp inhale, hers, then his. He didn't move closer. He didn't have to. The silence did it for him. For one impossible moment, they stood there, eyes locked, breaths uneven, the whole night holding still around them. And then, a voice from inside. "Mom? Are you out here?" The sound shattered the quiet. She pulled her hand back like it burned, stepping away fast enough to hide the tremor in her movements. "I should go," Ethan murmured. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Through the window, Daniel's face appeared briefly, searching, oblivious. When Ethan turned to leave, she whispered his name, barely audible, almost lost to the wind. He froze. Just his name. Nothing more. But it was enough to ruin the distance they'd both tried to keep. It had been 3 days since the night in the garden, and Ethan couldn't shake the echo of her voice, the way she'd said his name, barely above. A whisper, like something she wasn't supposed to feel. He replayed it too often. Every sound on his phone made his pulse jump, though she hadn't texted since. When he saw her again, it wasn't planned. Daniel had forgotten his jacket after class, and Ethan offered to drop it off. A harmless errand, until she opened the door again. This time, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Daniel's not here," she said, keeping one hand on the doorframe. "I know," he said quietly. "It's for him." Their eyes held a second too long. She stepped aside anyway. "You can leave it on the chair." He did. Then neither moved. The room felt smaller than before, like the air had thickened between them. The record player sat silent, the light low, the faint smell of rain slipping through the open window. "You've been avoiding me," he said finally. Her breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. "That's not true." "It is." She turned toward him, defensive, but there was something vulnerable in it, something close to fear. "This isn't something we can afford to play with, Ethan." "I'm not playing." She looked away. "You're young. You think you mean that?" His voice softened. "Then tell me I'm wrong." She didn't. The silence pressed down, heavy and full. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked just slightly. "You remind me of who I was before I stopped believing in this kind of thing." He took a slow step forward. "And who was that?" "Someone reckless," she whispered. "Someone who thought wanting something was enough." He was close now, too close. A strand of her hair brushed his hand, and she froze. The touch was nothing, and everything. Her lips parted like she might say his name again, but instead, she whispered, "You should go." "I don't want to." "I know." She took a step back, but the table caught her hip, stopping her. He didn't move. He just stood there, his breath uneven, his fingers flexing as if trying not to reach for her. "You have no idea what you're doing to me," she said. Voice barely steady. "Yes, I do." Her eyes met his, guarded, desperate, wanting. "You think this is romantic," she murmured. "But it's dangerous." "Then why aren't you stopping it?" The question landed between them like a confession. She drew in a sharp breath, her hand brushing his wrist as if to push him away, but she didn't. Her fingers stayed, trembling slightly, tracing the space between his pulse and her hesitation. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that single point of contact. Then a sound, the faint buzz of her phone on the table. She blinked, stepping back as though waking from a dream. The distance between them opened like a wound. "Ethan," she began, voice unsteady, but the words didn't come. He waited, every muscle tense, knowing that if he moved, even an inch, something would break. She looked up at him then, eyes glistening, and for a moment it seemed she might close the space again. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "You need to leave before I forget why I can't." And this time, he did. He closed the door behind him, slowly, quietly, but her scent stayed on his sleeve, and the sound of his name on her lips refused to fade. Rain had started again, soft, constant, and oddly familiar. Ethan walked home in it, but his thoughts stayed behind in her living room, in the space between her words and the door that had closed too slowly. He didn't sleep. He tried to read, tried to write, tried to drown the ache in anything else, but her voice kept breaking through the noise. The next morning, Daniel found him in the cafe. "Hey, you left early last night," he said, grabbing a chair. "Mom said you dropped my jacket off." Ethan froze mid-sip. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "She was home." Daniel nodded, distracted, stirring his coffee. "Weird night. She's been acting different lately. Quieter." Ethan forced a laugh. "Maybe she's tired of your friends showing up uninvited." "Maybe." Daniel smirked. "Though she did ask about you." The words hit, like a pulse under his skin. "She what?" "Just casually. Said you seemed thoughtful." Daniel's grin faltered. "She's been through a lot. I don't want her getting hurt again, you know." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, I know." That evening, he couldn't stay away. He told himself he'd only return her umbrella. She'd left it in the cafe weeks ago, but the truth sat heavier than that. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised. Only tired. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but stepped aside anyway. He handed her the umbrella. "You left this." "I didn't." He blinked. "What?" "I didn't leave it. I told myself I did, so you'd have a reason to come back." The confession landed between them like a spark catching dry air. Her hand trembled slightly as she took the umbrella. "I thought I could handle it," she whispered. "But you keep showing up in the quiet moments I've spent years protecting." He wanted to reach for her, but didn't dare. Then tell me to stop. I already did, she said, meeting his eyes. And yet, her voice trailed off. She turned, walking toward the table where her phone sat blinking. A message glowed on the screen. Daniel, you home? Ethan left his notebook. She read it, and something inside her seemed to shift. Guilt, fear, something else entirely. He knows I saw you, she murmured. He's starting to notice. Ethan swallowed. Then tell him the truth. She turned sharply. Which truth? That I can't stop thinking about you? That every time I tell myself this is over, I end up waiting for you to knock? The storm outside echoed the one in her voice. He stepped closer without realizing it, the space between them collapsing into breath and heartbeat. Her hand brushed his chest as if to stop him, but her fingers stayed there, trembling. Say something, she whispered. He couldn't. Every word he might have spoken got lost in the air between them. Warm, electric, dangerous. Then, from outside, Daniel's voice cut through the rain. Mom? Ethan? Are you here? Her hand fell away. Ethan's pulse spiked. She turned toward the door, hair brushing his cheek as she passed. Go, she whispered urgently. But before he moved, she looked back once, eyes fierce, pleading, alive. Don't make me choose, she said. And then the front door opened. Daniel's voice still echoed from the doorway. It was a heartbeat of chaos, a voice in the hall, the sound of footsteps, and then silence again. By the time Ethan turned back, she was already closing the kitchen door behind them, her hands trembling as they found the edge of the counter. He can't see you here, she said, her voice barely a breath. I know. Then why didn't you go? He didn't have an answer. His pulse felt too loud, like the rain hammering against the windows. She turned toward him, eyes bright with panic and something deeper. This has to stop, Ethan. It's gone too far. He took a small step closer. Then tell me you don't feel it. Her breath caught. Don't do that. Do what? Make it sound simple. It is simple, he said softly. You're scared. So am I. But we're here. She shook her head, but her body betrayed her. A small shift closer, her fingers brushing the counter between them like she needed something solid to hold on to. I can't be the person you ruin your life for, she whispered. And you can't keep pretending you don't already matter, he said. The words broke something. She looked up sharply, eyes meeting his, glassy, defiant. Her hand lifted before she could stop it, fingertips grazing his cheek as if testing what was real. The touch was feather-light, but it carried every moment they hadn't dared to speak. He didn't move. He didn't need to. The world narrowed to the space between their breaths. You shouldn't be here, she said again, quieter this time. Then tell me to leave, he murmured. Her lips parted, no sound. Only silence. Only trembling air. He leaned forward, not to close the distance, but to listen, to the uneven rhythm of her breath, the way it stuttered when his hand brushed hers. I've spent years trying not to feel anything, she said finally. And now I can't turn it off. Ethan's voice was almost a whisper. Then don't. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, the air changed, heavy, suspended, as if the storm outside had found its way inside too. When she opened them again, something in her had softened. The fight was still there, but so was surrender. You don't understand what happens after this, she said. He nodded. Maybe not. But I know what happens if I walk away. Her hand trembled as she reached for him again. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just a touch along his wrist, his sleeve, his pulse. A sound escaped her, a half-breath, half-confession. You'll break my heart. He smiled, small and certain. Then we'll both be broken. They stood there, inches apart, rain whispering against the glass, her hand still resting over his. No more words. No more pretending. Only the quiet understanding that something had already changed, something neither of them could undo. Then, a faint knock at the front door. Daniel's voice again, closer this time. She stepped back, eyes wide, the moment collapsing but not gone. Go, she said, breathless. Please. Ethan hesitated. One last look, one silent promise, before he slipped out the side door into the rain. When she turned back toward the empty room, the air still held his warmth. And she whispered, almost to herself, too late. The storm passed overnight. By morning, the streets were washed clean, the air lighter, though inside Ethan, the rain hadn't really stopped. He hadn't seen her since that night. Every part of him replayed it. Her trembling voice, the nearness that had felt like confession. He told himself it was over. It should have been. But when he saw her again, it wasn't planned. It never was. She was at the cafe, the same one where it had all begun. Sitting by the window again, hands wrapped around a cup that had long gone cold. When she noticed him, something in her eyes changed. Not surprise this time. Not guilt. Just quiet acceptance. He hesitated at the door. Then she nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and he walked over. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she echoed, soft. The air between them was different now, still charged, still uncertain, but calmer. They'd already broken what could be broken. What was left was the truth. "I thought I'd ruined everything," he said finally. She smiled faintly. "Maybe we both did." He sat down across from her. Neither spoke for a while. The world outside moved as if none of it mattered. People hurrying past, cups clinking, the smell of espresso in the air. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said. "I tried to keep it simple." "It was never simple," he replied. "It was real." Her hand rested near his on the table, not touching, but close enough that warmth crossed the distance. "You should be with someone your age," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Someone else," he corrected softly. "Not necessarily my age." That made her laugh, quiet and fragile. "You never did listen, did you?" He shook his head. "Not good advice." The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like breath after drowning. Not relief exactly, but peace. She looked at him for a long time. "I don't know where this goes," she admitted. "Then let's not decide yet." Her hand turned, fingers brushing his. A simple motion, but full of everything they hadn't said. He reached across the small space and held her hand, not tightly, just enough to feel her pulse. It was steady now. So was his. "Whatever happens," she murmured, "I'll remember this." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. The gesture was gentle, human, not a beginning, not an ending, just truth in its simplest form. Neither spoke again. They didn't need to. Outside, the rain started again, softer this time, more like forgiveness than a storm. He watched her close her eyes, her thumb tracing slow circles against his hand. And for once, there was no fear left between them. Just quiet, imperfect understanding. Did you enjoy the story? Would you like more slow burn, emotionally charged romances like this one? Or something different next time?